right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Friday, July 1st, 2022. It's your daily tropical update. We continue to track a very busy time in the tropics here across the northern hemisphere, all three basins showing some signs of life. We start off in the Atlantic Basin, of course, today with what is now Tropical Storm Bonnie, the much awaited arrival. What was potential Tropical Cyclone 2 for the entire week, going all the way back to the time before the system crossed the Windward Islands, skipped across the northern coast of South America, and has finally achieved tropical storm status here in the Caribbean Sea. Landfall expected in Nicaragua tonight or early tomorrow morning. We also have two other areas of interest we've been watching. Invest 95L is now ashore across eastern Texas. No longer going to be expecting any development out of that one. And we have another wave tracking in behind Bonnie, but this wave not likely to develop here. Hurricane Center's complete outlook for the Atlantic Basin. Again, 95L has been taken off the map completely, and the wave behind Bonnie only has a 10% chance to develop in the next 5 days. So let's go ahead and start with what is now Bonnie. This is a little outdated here. Again, the Tropical Storm Bonnie now on deck. Satellite presentation here this morning. Looking better, finally. Finally looking better. We do have a much more coherent system on our hands. A consolidated thunderstorm activity, a little bit better vorticity and rotation here today. You can now see that low-level center fully tucked up under the more persistent thunderstorm activity. Hurricane hunters flew in there this morning, did find a central pressure around 1,005 millibars, which is respectable for a tropical storm. Nothing earth-shattering, but definitely is lower than it's been the last few days. And we do have a much more coherent cutoff of winds to where we have enough now to classify this as a tropical system. It has been a long time coming. This has been the problem Bonnie's had for the last several days. It's looked like a tropical storm, but it's just not quite hit that textbook definition. As I talked about in the previous videos, I think the Hurricane Center is going to go back and review this process. I don't think they meant for potential cyclones to last 5-6 days or whatever this one lasted. So we'll probably get some review on how they handle this going forward. But again, we do have the tropical storm now on deck. It is the second named storm of the 2022 season. We're pretty much right on schedule with how an average season would pay out so far. We didn't have any early season storms, so this is about on climatological schedule. Maximum stay Wednesday with Bonnie, 40 miles an hour, moving to the west to 20 miles an hour, and this is set for a landfall near the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica sometime tonight. Again, early tomorrow morning, this should already be moving across Central America, and by the Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening window, should be offshore. Now, just for the sake of record keeping, if Bonnie manages to hold herself together, which is very likely it will, the fast forward speed and lack of land interaction, this is a pretty small area of land and it goes over a big lake. Bonnie will not lose much strength moving across. The system will remain Bonnie in the eastern Pacific as it moves off, where it should have a nice chance to strengthen and become a hurricane by the middle of next week over the warm waters of the eastern Pacific. It looks like conditions will overall be favorable for that. Right now, it is forecast to stay off the coast of Mexico and not impact any land interests, but we'll have to monitor that just to be safe. But overall, again, tropical storm conditions warnings set for both ends of Nicaragua and Costa Rican coastlines. It is expected to be a tropical storm now. It's just not going to have enough time to become a hurricane. It just does not have enough time over water. This tracks well with our intensity models, HWRF showing this pressure far too low, but generally, some more intensification possible before that landfall. Again, that point just about the borderline where the center will be. Probably tropical storm force winds that 50-60 mile an hour range would be the most likely outcome with this, and periods of very heavy rain. But the good news is this will be moving pretty quickly, so we're not going to see massive flooding or massive damage and problems. But combined with the forward speed, if you're on the north end of this, you're going to get some pretty good wind out of it. So definitely keep that in mind out there. Again, this tracks well with our intensity guidance, who doesn't do much with it in the next 12-24 hours, keeps it tropical storm intensity, and then eventually does mostly push up into hurricane intensity by the middle of the week. It'll have a while to track in the eastern Pacific before it starts getting to that cooler water, but again, should be offshore and out of the way, and this also agrees excellent with our consensus models. Everything tracking for this thing to move through, move out, stay offshore, and stay out of people's hair. So good news there. But the second named storm of the season, the Atlantic Basin, just took quite a while to get to that point. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to what was Invest 95L real quick. Just to recap, this system is now ashore across parts of eastern Texas this morning. No more of a low-level vortex at all. You can see these deep southerly streaming clouds moving in, a lot of tropical moisture being pumped into parts of western Louisiana, eastern Texas today. This is beneficial rainfall, as we talked about. Texas and Louisiana are in some significant drought conditions right now, so this is not a drought buster, but it's certainly going to help the cause. Still looking at a potential for 2 to 4 inches of rain, some isolated cases around 6 inches of rain, again, right along that border of Texas and Louisiana. Houston getting in a little bit of it, about an inch or two. Not enough to really do a whole lot, but we've had a little bit of rain already from the system, so the totals you're seeing are still to come. So overall, it's been a nice benefit, but definitely not the omega drought buster that the state really needs. But again, no longer expecting any tropical development out of this one. And finally, we're looking at this wave out here in the central Atlantic and the main development region as it approaches the Windward Islands, gusty winds, and some heavy rain expected as this tropical wave moves through tonight. A little bit of thunderstorm activity this morning was actually kind of impressive, but overall, this system is not going to have a lot of time to get itself together. It's a very broad wave axis, does not have a closed circulation center right now, and this wave is quickly moving off in these strong trade winds to the west-northwest, and in a couple days we'll be in the Caribbean Sea, where pretty high levels of wind shear are forecast to develop. This is the wind shear forecast for late Friday and Saturday, and you can see here the upper level outflow from Bonnie combined with a strong upper trough across the western Atlantic. This is not going to have a favorable environment in the eastern Caribbean, and is very likely to be pulled apart and kept just as a moisture surge of a tropical wave. So something to watch, but not a big deal overall for us, and I would not be concerned about it for the eastern U.S. Real quick look at the Pacific Ocean today. We do have a system out far in the eastern Pacific that may still have a slight window to develop. It would just be a footnote in history. This thing's far off, nothing to worry about. Could be a short-lived tropical depression or storm, but chances are going down today. We'll see that. And again, Bonnie will show up on here sooner than later as it crosses. And from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center in the Western Pacific, we do have signs of life again after about 2.5 months of no activity. We've had 2 tropical storms pop up. Tropical Storm Chaba looking pretty nice this evening as the sun sets over there. We're looking at a system, a healthy tropical storm near typhoon intensity, that classic Western Pacific outflow in the southern channels here. Pretty good conditions for this. If it had more time, it'd probably be a pretty significant typhoon, but this is getting pretty close to the coastline of China, and it will be moving in here within the next day or so. Joint Typhoon Warning Center does forecast this to become a typhoon, maximum sustained winds near 70 knots, about 80 or so miles per hour, so a Category 1 hurricane on our scale, and it will move in here again within the day or so. A lot of heavy rain very likely as this thing kind of comes in and crawls ashore and falls apart. You can see here next to about 48 hours, this is kind of just sit over the coastline, so talking about a good bit of rain most likely. And then the other system out there, Tropical Storm Aere, as it looks like, we'll be moving through, pretty much taking the full tour of Japan. Almost every island of Japan will be getting some kind of activity from this. It is forecast to remain a tropical storm, but a pretty strong one at that. 55 knots, about 65 miles an hour. Going to be definitely a gusty event there, and will likely bring a lot of heavy rain as this thing works through over the next week or so. And we're talking about middle of next week, still being over Japan before beginning to dissipate. So after a pretty radio silent 2.5 months, your Western Pacific has woke up, and that's probably where the activity is going to be confined to as we look beyond the week here. It looks like the Atlantic Basin is probably going to go back quiet again. Bonnie sneaks out again by Saturday night out of the basin. This wave falls apart by the weekend. And then there is nothing else coming off Africa in the short term. That burst of activity has kind of came and gone. We're going to switch back to a more quiet period. You'll probably see the MJO rotate out of phase. You're going to have more suppressed upward motion in the Atlantic Basin overall. So it looks like the second half of July is probably going to be pretty quiet. And guys, again, remember, this is the time of year where we see this a lot. We see long periods of not a lot of activity. Again, hurricane season really doesn't start until early to mid-August, so don't let your guard down. Just know that these ebbs and flows of activity are very common this time of year, so we'll see that probably the next 2 weeks, and then we will pick it back up. So unless something else pops up in the short term, we probably won't have too many more videos for you coming down the line until things pick back up, but we will talk to you again whenever there's something to monitor, and we'll be watching for any homegrown threats or other issues until then. So that's what I got for you guys today on your daily tropical update. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.